to thank you for joining us at the 11 Alert Desk today. I'm digital content producer Aspen Andrews, and I am here with Steve Carleton, Chief Clinical Officer at Porch Health. And we wanted to hop on a little bit today because, as we know, catastrophic flooding has had an immense impact on those in Texas, and even here in Colorado, people are feeling the impacts as well. So Steve, I know you've said that you have a personal connection with this tragedy.
Yeah, so I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and I've spent a lot of time in that Guadalupe River Valley and Hunt, familiar with Camp Mystic, and lots of friends have gone there in the past, and it really Camp Mystic is it's 100 years old. That camp has been sitting on the Guadalupe River for a long time, and yeah, so a lot of people in my community back home have been directly impacted by this, sadly.
Yeah, I hope everyone you know are doing okay. And when we take a broader look as well, people in Colorado can relate on a lot of levels to this kind of tragedy. So could you go into that a little bit and how people here could be affected by this?
You know, the reason there's been such a significant reaction to this is because a few things. Because of so many kids, uh, unfortunately lost their lives in this, and these were kids recreating. These were kids that their parents dropped them off to go to camp, right? And like that's the safest place on earth than getting a call that your kids tragically, lost their life in a flood, and this freak accident. It not only is affecting sort of those people close to it that have been directly impacted and lost their lives or lost loved ones, but we're seeing that these kinds of things affect the whole country. Similar to things like Sandy Hook, right? These unimaginable tragedies that happen, and everybody is just trying to wrap their head around it. If you're a parent out there and you've seen these stories, you can't help but think about sort of what would that be like for that happened to me, or if I were to lose a partner, a friend, or a loved one. And so it's had significant ripples.
Yeah, well, I mean, how do you even cope with losing a child in this kind of tragic way?
Losing a child is perhaps the single most harmful thing for somebody's mental health and stability. This is something that is very complicated. This is complicated grief. These parents and these people in Texas, not only have they lost a loved one and are grieving sort of that loss, but they're also having to come to terms with how it happened and how tragic and traumatic this all occurred.
Yeah, it's terrible. And if you're a friend or a support system to someone who's dealing with a tragedy like this, what do you say to them?
Yeah, and so it's less about what you say to people, and it's more about how you show up, right? It's a really don't think about sort of the words you say, right? That's less important. You don't want to give platitudes. They're in a better place. These types of things. Those are not helpful, right? What is helpful is acts of kindness and showing up, right? Dropping dinner off at the door, saying, let's go have coffee next Thursday. I'm gonna, in my own experiences, like people just sending paper plates and utensils, people sending toilet paper, paper towels, sort of these things that are just sort of part of daily life and just making things a little easier. Those small acts of kindness are just they go such a long way, much further than um, giving condolences and telling people to reach out if they need anything. Because the reality is they're not going to reach out, and they're in a desperate state. And the more you can just proactively support and find ways to help them is better.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And for people here in Colorado, where can they go if they want to learn some more about how to cope with this and just how to deal with everything?
Yeah, and I think a couple more things on sort of the response to this. And, I've spent some time talking about sort of that direct impact of if you've directly sort of lost a loved one, or a friend or someone like that. But um, the most common reaction when things like this happen that are unimaginable, they're so outside of the norm, They're just devastating. These kind of acts of God, like sort of like this has happened, is it's really common for people to avoid it, right? So for people to bury their head in the sand, not think about it, not talk about it. It's also common that people dive in head first and they absorb just story after story, news clip after news clip, reel after reel, right? They're overindulging in kind of the horrific nature of sort of what's happened there. One of the most common reactions to that is that people start to do this shoulda, woulda, coulda thing, right? They can start to have these over reactive responses to this, starting to point fingers, sort of blame, figure out like who did something wrong that sort of led to this. That's a really common reaction because people want to feel safe, right? And if you blame someone, then people think that that's making them safe again. If I blame someone, it's sort of like saying this will never happen to me because where I send my kids, they do X, Y, Z, right? And that's a really not a very helpful response or sort of way to cope with this. So, um, I think if the bigger conversation about grief and loss, right? In Colorado, we have Judy's House for Kids, and if you're an adult, there's lots of great resources on psychology today. You can search on there sort of specifically for types of therapy and sort of grief being one of them. Find individual therapists, find different groups that support that specifically with other people going through similar experiences. And as always, if that grief has turned into a substance use problem, which is common, it's substance use unfortunately is a common way people deal with grief and loss, and when that becomes a problem, sort of you also need somewhere to turn, and Porch Health can be a resource there.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you coming to talk to us a little bit about this. Once again, I know so many people across the country have been impacted. So I appreciate you coming to just talk a little bit about what we can do to help cope and help our friends and family cope.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Aspen.